O quê? É agora que o Boris está online, já está a dizer se a conferência foi anulada.
Carolina, o Mar já está os slides do Boris.
¿Cómo fue anulada? ¿Está bien ya?
Sim, 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 aqui. Posso falar? Sim? E onde é que está o professor Boris? Não estou a ver.
Es que no vas a ver.
We don't... but... Hello.
Entonces, yo si permitís voy a ponerme así para ver.
Posso começar? Good afternoon to the Resuperes International Congress and the MULTIPLIER event at the University of Algarve, Portugal. Thank you very much for being today with us, all of you, and in a special way to Dr. Boris Cyrulnik. Dr. Boris Cyrulnik, thank you so much. It's a great honor for me to introduce to all of you the neuropsychiatrist dubbed by many as founder of the concept of resilience. Thank you very much once more, and to all the participants in person and online. I have the honor to give some little words about the curriculum of Professor Boris Cyrulnik. Dr. Boris Cyrulnik is a neuropsychiatrist, director of teaching University of Toulon, about attachment and family systems. He studied medicine at University of Paris. A neuropsychiatrist by training, he led a research group in clinical ethology at the Intercommunity Hospital Center of Toulon, La Seine-sur-Mer, and is regarded by members of the scientific community as the promoter of the concept of resilience. He is teaching director of the University Diploma in Human Ethology at the University of Toulon, and author of several works, alone or in co-authorship. And from 2012, he chaired the Scientific Council of the private Fernando Pessoa University, which became the Centre Libre d'Enseignement Supérieur International, and then Europe EDUS, together with another academic and former president of the University of Toulon. After chairing the Assises de l'École Maternelle in 2018, he was appointed by President Emmanuel Macron in September 2019 to chair the Comité des 1000 premiers jours de l'enfant, a founding period of childhood development. We could say a lot of things, more beautiful things about Dr. Boris Cyrulnik. But I think that all of us knows very, very well his curriculum, his marvelous curriculum, and we are very grateful for his today with us online. With a lot of honor, and this is my honor, and the honor of the Erasmus, the general coordinator of this Erasmus Resuperes project and this International Congress and Multiple event, I am the honor of listening Dr. Boris Cyrulnik from Toulon in this moment. Dr. Boris, now the word is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be with you in Algarve, Portugal. And I apologize for my weak English, but I shall try to speak English with you. And What could you show the first slide, please?
Yes, yes.
The first slide. Yes. The next one. Thank you. What is resilience? Resilience is a Latin word which means something like to bounce back, but it's not really to bounce back. Because it's to receive a trauma, to bounce back, and to start again another kind of development. The slide before, please, because I'm speaking about. Thank you. It was Amy Werner, an American psychologist, who gave this word a clinical meaning. She followed many hundreds of children in the Hawaii, and these children had no family, no school, and were mainly street children with amazed. And when 30 years later she was allowed to meet again these children, she discovered that 72 of them were slaughtered, psychologically slaughtered, but surprisingly, 28 of these children have got a job, have learned to speak and to learn, and was not very neurotic. And she was amazed because they made a family, and she was very surprised. And it is Michael Rutter, a professor in London School of Psychology, and Michael Rutter said these children have something to learn. How could them start again another development that we could call resilience? This resilience is not really to make a development. Resilience it is to make a good development, but it's not the quiet development, it's not the normal development. It is another development after a trauma, the starting point of another development. So the simplest definition of resilience would be how to start another development after a trauma and have successful adaptation to overcome adversity. The simple definition is also the messiest because there are lots of determinants: genetics, determinant, epigenetics, emotional, narrative, social, cultural, and even spiritual development as every one of us in the daily life. For those reasons, we are due to give up linear causalities and need to train to ecosystemic reasoning. Next slide. Follow. It was Darwin in the 19th century who introduced the word evolution in psychology and in biology. When he was on sea, he discovered that in Galapagos, in the island of Galapagos, there was the same species of birds. They have a fine beak when they lived in an island where fruit is thin, and they got a sturdy beak when the same species live on another island where fruit are thick. The beak was adapted to the fruit. Soft fruit fine beak, thick fruit, thick beak. And it was the starting point of a new conception of biology. It is still with a huge opposite to this way of reasoning, but it's possible this biological determinant for is compulsory, but it's not sufficient. Next, following slide. Next, thank you. All these people are not able to speak. My cat and my dog are not able to speak, and it's possible to understand them because they have another language before words, body language with sounds, with gestures, and my dog is able to understand 200 of my word. It's enormous. My dog is able to understand a lot of my words. This baby can speak only between 20 to 30 months of his life. He is able to learn any language, any word, only because a sensitive period of 10 months, no baby is able to speak the first day of his life. He must wait 20 months before the sensitive period of language. This man, I hope you know this man, Charlie Chaplin. In his film, you understand what he thinks, all his feelings, and you are without any word. And afterwards, after this man has got a stroke, is no longer able to speak, but we can yet understand what he means by his mimical and his gestures. It is the reason why when I worked in Japan, a lot of Japanese people told me that the notion of individual is an illusion, an Occidental illusion, a way of thinking. Next slide. Merci. We are not. It's impossible to make experiments on babies or on human people. And 30 days before, it was still possible to experiment with primates, but it's no longer possible. This monkey has been isolated he was alone, and when this monkey is deprived of alterity of another monkey, he becomes self-centered because only its own body is an object outside himself, and he becomes self-centered, and he acquired a vulnerability before verbal word. He is unable to understand and he is unable to express himself. And so we can think it's possible to think that when a human baby is put in isolation, in deprivation of another people, he has got the same behavior. When I worked in Romania under the Ceausescu dictator, I could see 170,000 young babies that would isolated because their mother were due to work 40 days a day, 40 hours a day, and these children were left behind and were left strictly alone. And they got the same behavior, the same self-centered behavior as the monkey. But it's possible to make an experiment with a monkey. It's not possible to make experiment with a human baby. And when we got photo slide, next slide. When we got, excuse me, next slide after. Okay. When a baby has been, a human baby has been isolated in the first month, of his life, his brain is atrophic, and mainly the forebrain is atrophic because there is no stimulation, and the limbic system is also atrophic because when there is nobody else, when there is no alterity, there is nothing to put in memory. The forebrain is the neurological basis of anticipation, and if there is no other human people, there is nobody to see, nobody to smile, nobody to make a sound. And when there is no relationships, there is nothing to put in memory. And these two parts of the brain are atrophic. Forebrain atrophic. It's no longer possible to make anticipation. Limbic system atrophic. There is nothing to put in memory. And one function of the forebrain bundle, the forebrain, is to inhibit the renencephalic amygdala. And when there is an atrophic forebrain, the renencephalic amygdala is huge, 10 times as usual. Such a brain has acquired a vulnerability factor. The neural circuitry had been imprinted towards the punishment circuit. The punishment circuit is to the temporal lobe instead of the pleasure circuit. The circuitry is to the forebrain, the median forebrain bundle, which vehicle the notions of pleasure instead of toward the circuitry toward the temporal lobe is the punishment circuit, which selected only the adverse and disagreeable information of punishment. And the median forebrain bundle in that direction is construct the reward system. The reward system is only stimulated if there is an alterity, somebody else to speak, to smile, and the punishment system is circuited if there is nobody. What means that if a child is grown up alone with no reward system, he integrated all information as a punishment. And when a child is securized, the same information is circuited to the reward system. And what is very important is the first 1,000 day begins in the womb and in the family home. We discovered in the commission of the first 1,000 days that even in the womb, the brain was constructed, and the verbality after the first day of life, the verbality, which is not still a word, but it's a prosody, a musical information that stimulated the brain of the baby after his birth. So when the word of a baby is deprived of stimulation and deprived even of in words, his brain is altered, even because at this level of development, a word is an affective stimulation. It's later, during the third year, that the word will be another kind of stimulation. It's only after the third year of life that a word will be stimulating. Before the third year, a word is an affective stimulation. It's very important to speak to a baby. When you speak around the baby, you can see that his left temporal lobe start to become red. But when we speak to the baby in front of you, near the baby, it's only a precise place of the left temporal brain that is stimulated. This place is planum temporal. That means that when you speak to a baby, smiling, looking at him, when you speak to a baby, you are sculpting his brain and transforming what would have been the sound zone, and you are transforming this sound zone into speech zone. But if there is nobody to speak to the baby, the zone will continue to hear a sound, but will be not able to understand word. And when I was in Bucharest, in Romania, and when I could see some of the 170,000 children completely isolated, these children were totally unable to speak. And when we made some scanner, we could see that their prefrontal lobe was atrophic, their system limbic was atrophic, and the amygdala renencephalic was huge, 10 times than normal. Resilience is possible when we give to the child an affective substitute by speaking to the child and by nursing the child. And it's an affective stimulation. The earliest is the better. The earliest, the easiest way, because the synaptization, which slows down with age, is fantastic during the 5 first years. And when you give the child a substitute, an affective substitute, you can see at the electroencephalogram, as I did, you can see that as soon as the child is securized, one night or two later, the synaptization starts again. it's amazing. 2 nights later, an atrophic forebrain start another kind of development and start to track another track of neurons. So the language, we can photograph it that to cope with an adversity is not resilience, is to coping, is a coping. You are in the synchronic time to cope with an adversity. You are alone, you are afraid. You cope with, you are resistant, but you are not resilient. And you start another kind of development, which is resilience, when after the trauma, you can start again another development, and you can track other connectome, other tracks of neurons. The coping is not resilience, and resilience is an evolution, and coping is synchronic instead of resilience is diachronic, longitudinal. The best definition of resilience comes from agriculture that says a ground is resilient when after a fire, a flood, or a pollution, a new flora, a new fauna appears, beautiful and safe, but it is a new way of wildlife. Resilience, so, is an interactive and dynamic process, sometimes easy and happy, sometimes uneasy and unhappy later, according to the transaction between brain and what is imprinted in his mind by its environment. Epigenetic factors are far more determinant when a pregnant woman is stressed. Whatever the cause, the DNA undergoes a methylation, CH3, which modifies the expression of her DNA. Without any modification of its structure, it is always the same DNA, but its expression is very different. The environment is able to tutorize a development in a lot of different directions. It's impossible, so to say, DNA is determinant for a development. DNA is only the starting point of biological development. And when your brain is development in different ways, in different environment, you got a way to see the world and to taste the world and to understand the world before the language of the third year. The first 1,000, and when the DNA undergoes a methylation, we can see when the pregnant woman is left alone, this DNA distortion is transmitted through generation. But as soon as a mother is securized, the methylation is diluted and disappears in 3 days, and the electroencephalogram becomes normal for the age. The first 1,000 days constitute a sensitive period from fertilization to speech in the third day, while an amazing synaptization 500,000 to 1 million synapses each minute, when the baby can acquire easily protective factors or vulnerability factors. When the baby is surrounded by a quite affective and verbal sensorial niche, the myelinization of his left temporal of his brain is stimulated. But speaking to a baby, addressing words aimed at him is a huge stimulation of the planum temporal and precise fold of the left temporal brain. Instead of when the baby grows up in an impoverished, next slide, when the baby grows up in an impoverished sensorial niche, lacking in affective and verbal stimulation, his brain becomes dysfunctional. But as soon as the baby is placed in another securizing and stimulating niche, resilience will be more a new organization of the brain, a cognitive reappraisal than a coming back to an initial well-being that should rather be a healing process. Resilience is not a healing process. Resilience is another kind of good development. And so, thanks to some tutors of resilience, as relative friends, a priest, a psychoanalyst, a psychologist, or even a sportsman, a musician, and so on, the brain is stimulated, the tracks of neurons are put together, and the brain starts again another development. But this development depends on the structure of the affective, verbal, and later social context. But it's the reason why becoming more interactional, when we become interactional, we are not prisoner of the past, but as it is the case in PTSD. In PTSD, we always think about the trauma. We are prisoner of the past, but as soon as we meet in our surrounding affective world, we start another development. Photo slide, next slide. When the trauma is acute, it is hyper-aware, but sometimes the brain is dumb, knocked out by the shock, and there is no memory. Many children are raised within adverse circumstances, suffering daily with insidious stress that give them an internal working model, a bad representation of themselves. Their brains are trained toward the circuit of punishment, making the child suffer more than a securized child whose brain had been oriented toward the reward system. The process of resilience consists of securizing the child to soothe his amygdala and help him attribute a meaning to his trauma, so modifying the feeling of a senseless event. Lots of animals are able to decipher the meaning of a shout, indicating where a predator is coming from, but we human beings are the only species capable of storytelling. This little monkey, has been experimentally isolated, and he is put, as we say, in psychotherapy. But it's not a verbal psychotherapy, it's only a contact psychotherapy. as soon as these monkeys that were isolated are put together in psychotherapy 1 hour a day, the self-centered behaviors disappear. And some days later, 1 hour a day, self-centered activities disappeared. And it's for us symptoms of good development. But such a tool, but the memory is not the memory is not the return of the past. The memory is the representation of the past. It means that memory is always intentional. Could you see the next slide? These children were isolated in Romania, but also in Quebec, in Montreal, children of Duplessis that were isolated, and the children were not, of course, able to speak, and there were like a child sauvage, so I've forgotten the word, but these children are not able to speak. When they are isolated before the sensitive period of the acquisition of the language, it's possible when they are put again in a society, in a group that speaks to the child, is able to learn easily to speak. When he is isolated after the sensitive period, he is able to speak, but this speech is strange. But when the child is isolated during the first 1,000 days, he is not able to speak, and the resilience will be very difficult. Next slide. Currently, since 50 years, neuroimaging can brain of a child who has been isolated. Limbic system atrophic, and it's impossible, it's very difficult, it's impossible to see the hyper-functioning of the amygdala, renencephalic amygdala. But when the child is put in a surrounding with affectiveness and speech, very quickly we can see that this atrophic prefrontal disappears and the brain becomes functional. So the neurological resilience is possible to be photographed. So a factor of vulnerability, if the child is left alone, left behind, a factor of vulnerability remains a factor of vulnerabilities. But the earliest and the easiest, when a child is surrounded by affectivity and words, the resilience is very easy. But the more you wait, the more difficult will be resilience, because what was a dysfunctional brain become a structural brain. And it's more difficult when you wait too long. In a society living in peace, 70% of toddlers have got a secure attachment, which gives them an easy affectiveness, which leads to an easy socialization. In the same society, 5% of toddlers suffer from confused, disorganized attachment. But as we can see currently, in a society in war, 40% of children have acquired a secure attachment instead of 70% in a society in peace. And in a society in war, 20 to 25% suffer from confused attachment, which put them on the conveyor belt to the psychopathology, as in poor countries as Congo, Lavia, Romania, and paradoxically, in rich countries as the USA, with a low level of well-being. USA are very rich, but have got a low level of well-being. And in all people, resilience is more an optimization of the protective factors. Next slide, please. In MDD, major disease, major depression, the alteration of the brain is the same as isolation. You can see atrophic forebrain, atrophic limbic system, and only in neuroimagery we can see the hypertrophy of the amygdala, the renal-cephalic amygdala. It's the same in MDD. When you are in isolation because of your depression, the brain is altered. But when you are sustained, when you are securized, and when somebody invites you to speak, to tell your story, the brain starts another development. It's very plastic. In the old people, resilience is more an optimization of the protective factors acquired in their younger years than a new development. Photo suivante. Next slide. The factors acquired in their younger years, elderly experience many stressful life events, but when they are emotionally supported, they recover more quickly than we could have expected. In France, after World War II, veterans were treated with respect and few of them suffered from PTSD. Conversely, the soldiers who served in the Vietnam War or after the French War in Algeria, and after the survivors of Shoah, the Jewish slaughter, who encountered, and after the war, Jewish survivors encountered a disbelieving society, and they suffer from psychic difficulties because nobody was able to understand and to believe them, and they were so left alone. And there were a lot of PTSD. Alors, the first slide before, the slide before, merci. When I went to Congo, which is a beautiful country in huge difficulty of war and poverty and social precarity, families are very well structured, and this poor country has not a great number of PTSD because families are well structured and they are very in social precarity. When you live in a totalitarian language, there is only only believing system. There is only one truth. It's very easy, and you are to be secure because you are not hesitating, as in democracy, where you are due to choose between two truths. We are due to choose between two storytellings. And when you are living in a language, totalitarian language, it's easier because there is one storytelling to believe in. The next slide. When you have been raised and well securized, the same information is trapped, is seized by suffering, transported in the spinal cord, and arrived in the encephalization of the brain. And when you have been securized when a child, the information is oriented by a track to the reward system. And when who has been maltreated or isolated, the same suffering isolation is tracked, circuited in the spinal cord, and have a relay in the thalamus and oriented where the punishment system. It is the same information, but in the first case, the information is rapidly resilient instead of the same information when you have been isolated as a child is oriented where the punishment system. The same physical information is far more suffering when, as a child, you learn to suffer. And when, as a child, you learn to cope with the suffering, it's easier for you to cope with the suffering and to start a resilience system. Next slide. So, for a summary, before you can acquire factors of protection or factors of vulnerability. During the trauma can be huge, but the huge trauma is not the more suffering. The most altering trauma is the insidious trauma. And after the trauma, the main factors of protection are affectivity, to support the wound, to support the wound, and the meaning attributed to the trauma. The way you attribute a meaning to a trauma modifies the way you support the trauma. Next slide. So it's possible to choose, and we human people, it's possible. We are able to act on the surrounding, on the social factors that act on our development. I apologize for my weak English. I hope you can understand even two or three ideas we can discuss now.
Dear Professor, thank you so much for your excellent conference. I never heard someone explain the Sunrise program so like you. Thank you. It's difficult for a psychologist, but it's but it's very easy for you. You are a neuropsychiatrist. So thank you so much for your excellent conference. As we could listen, Professor Boris, Dr. Boris Cyrulnik, spoke about biological and cultural factors that interrelate to influence the ability of individuals, groups, or communities to overcome adversity and adapt to challenges. He spoke with us, he explained to us how important it is to help children, the babies who are isolated and they are nothing, no one with them, and the trauma arrive and the language don't arrive, and they are very unhappy. And all of us in this room and all of you online, I think that you had a beautiful and very good explanation about still face. That is very important to study and to understand. And the professor explained to all of us, in person and online, that resilience is not determined only by genetics or culture in isolation, but by the dynamic interaction between these factors. Biology provides the initial resource, such as genetics and neurobiology, that shape the stress response, while culture provides the social and psychological means to cope with adversity. He explained very well what is coping and what is not, and what is resilience. And now we can make a transition to the resilience of higher education. And we can take the conference of our key speaker, Dr. Boris Cyrulnik, and considering the biocultural determinants, it is a multidimensional challenge that requires an integrated approach, which addresses both biological, such as neurobiological and genetic aspects. For me, Professor Boris speaks about that like anyone, because he is Dr. Boris Cyrulnik. And culture, such as values, beliefs, and cultural practice factors. In fact, for resilience to be effectively promoted in educational context, it's necessary to implement interventions that respect the particularities of each student and the factors that influence their development. It's very important, very important. And we must think about what the professor said, the importance of the protective factors. We can think and make a transition from this conference to all the students of all our universities and all the teachers of all 5 universities, and think how important it is to consider biocultural determinants should be comprehensive and adapted to the context of the students and of the context of the teachers. This implies integrating practice to promote physical and mental health, valuing cultural diversity, developing social emotional skills, and continuous support from teachers. Such interventions help not only to strengthen individual resilience, but also to create a healthy, inclusive school environment capable of preparing students to face life's challenges in a more adaptive, competent, and balanced way. Dr. Boris Cyrulnik show us a little bit of this trajectory. In Congo, in a lot of countries where you were working. And I think that is a very good lesson for all of us who are listening and who were the opportunity to be with us in this online, in this and in person here. It's true that the conference drew attention to a world with otherness. This implies a valuable perspective on how understanding the other and the diversity of human experience are deeply linked to the construction of resilience and collective well-being, because otherness is fundamental for social coexistence, empathy, and construction of fairer, more human, understanding, and balanced world. When this otherness is absent, an egocentric world emerges, where the limited view of oneself predominates over difference, leading to an impoverishment of human relationship and a reduction in the ability to deal with challenges in a collaboration and integrative way. Otherness and the biocultural determinants of resilience are closely linked as how we cope with adversity, and how that depends not only on biological factors, but also on how we are culturally shaped and our ability to recognize and respect differences. In a world without otherness, resilience would be impoverished, as a lack of mutual understanding and support would make overcoming challenges and an isolated and lonely task. And I can make a conclusion, if I can. Therefore, the promotion of otherness and integration of biocultural determinants into educational policies and practice are fundamental to create a more resilient, more empathic, and more supportive society. And I would like to tell Professor Boris that we don't go to put any question to him, because it was so, I don't know if you want to do that, but I think that it was so beautiful and so excellent, the conference that he gave to us, that I only want to say to him, thanks, thanks, and thanks. We go to reflect, we go to study, we go to explain to our students and to our teachers how important it is, the Still Face program. And Professor Dr. Boris, we are written a book, handbook, is a manual about resilience, about your topic. And we don't have in this manual Still Face. I don't know why I didn't remember that. I teach that in my lessons, but I didn't remember. And now you remember, all of us, how important it is for children, for young children, for help them to not be isolated in the society, to help them to grow and to go to
another kind of development, and that development can help him to be some resilient. Because when the children are isolated, there is no resilience. They don't speak. They don't have anyone in interaction with. So, Professor, I don't know if you want some question, but the question is, please go on to continue to do your conferences, because they are excellent and they are a moment to learn, to reflect, and to help with your conference the others, our students, our teachers, our families, our friends, in the society. I don't have any words more to explain how grateful we are, all of us, to listen, to have the honor to listen you. Thank you, and thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to say something to Dr. Boris Cyrulnik.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much for your commentaries. Could I see, maybe could I see the slide of the still face? It was in the first slide. Is it possible? Could you tell the... yes.
This one.
Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Yes, okay, thank you. Before, yes, merci. You told that this is the still face of Cyrulnik that everybody knows now. In the first slide, you see that the children about 3 to 4 months and its mother. And its mother is due to interact with his child without other orders. Spontaneously, the mother and the child interact, and very often, in 60 cases, it is the child that triggers the interaction. And look, you can see that when in the synchronic interaction, mimico-facial interaction, when the baby opened the mouth, the mother opened the mouth. When the baby smiled, the mother smiled. And Cyrulnik told the mother, stop interact, stop mimical faces, stop mimical. The mother stops. Very quickly, the child put backward. And very rapidly, the child, when the mother is still, the child cries and becomes self-centered. The mother, and when the child cries, the mother stop and start again is mimical fashion. And look, it's possible, it's easy to see that there is a rebound of attachment. The attachment is activated because before there was a lack of attachment. And this experiment is very well known, and it is very important to pose another problem. When there is no attachment, there is a dysfunctional brain. But when there is always attachment, it's always another dysfunctional brain. And a child needs his mother be there and his mother not to be there, to be pleased, to be activated, to be attached to his mother. But if this commentary is true, it's very important because it's an alternative rhythm. It's necessary to have attachment, and it's necessary to no longer have attachment, as it's necessary to have dark and light, night and day, flux and reflux, systole and diastole. The rhythm are the living rhythm. If always the same stimulation, it's no longer a stimulation. A stimulation which is always the same is an habituation. The memory is sleepy. When the stimulation is always the same, you put in the brain, you put in the mind of the child's brain, the child's mind, sleepy brain. There is maybe if this is true, we are due to organize and to tell the mother, beware of burnout. When you are always to the child, you acquire, mother, you acquire a vulnerability factor. You are due to care for yourself. And this this brief lack of attachment will stimulate the child's attachment. Could you understand what I said? Yes. It is astonished for me. My English is so weak. Could you understand?
Well, Professor Boris, there is someone here, a colleague of mine. Oh, thank you so much for your explanation, of course. But there is here someone who wanted to ask you something, Professor.
Yes,
George.
Thank you, Professor Carolina. Thank you, Professor Boris. Sorry, your family name is always difficult for me to pronounce. I'm sorry. Thank you for your illuminating conference. But I would like to ask you a question about the implications of resilience in school practices. Because this morning we had a very intense conference by Professor Joaquim Azevedo, who is near us here, telling he works with dropout children from the school system, okay, adolescents and youth. And he testified that it is very, very difficult to work with children, with youngsters and adolescents who have been dropped out from school for a number of reasons, family reasons, etc. So my question is, how can we use the resilience strategies to improve and to capture these problematic children and young people to meaningful experiences in school? How can this be possible? Is it lack of affection, lack of human approach? How can we develop some resilient strategies to recover some problematic youngsters to a meaningful life, schooling life, etc.? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Because resilient research is increasingly sensitive to a social, ecological, and narrative framework. During the first years of life, a baby acquires protective factors that will last a long time, but it's not in brain. It's not imprinted in his brain. It's evolutive. Vulnerability factors make a pathway towards the punishment systems, as I said, but the politics aspect of resilience is crucial. In the first central niche, by allowing a woman to do her pregnancy work peacefully, supported by a long parental leave, as in Spain, France, Denmark, and a growing number of countries by a paternal leave. And since in France, we have got a new law, and that paternal leave is growing, the depression around the birth are slowing. Young mother, in 1 year only, the first year after the law, the depression of mother was slowing, and the suicide of mother was near to 1 or 3 suicides instead of 10 to 15 suicides of mother with a baby of 2 to 3 months. It's a law, it's a political law by the presence of the father that securizes the mother and that prevent the mother from depression. She is not alone. She can cope with the difficulty, and she can struggle against burnout. When the young mother is alone with her child and is alone with her job, it is not possible to cope with all this effort. And it's a conveyor belt to burnout. And there is burnout mainly in women and mainly in mother, only in Occidental society. In poor society, where mothers are poor, of course, but are never alone, there are less depressions. There are less burnout. The political decisions and educational decisions are very important to resilience. When I was invited in Finland, I was amazed because in Finland they slow all the scholar rhythm. Notation intervene only after 11 years. During the first year, there is no notation. When a child doesn't understand, the teacher told it's well. Don't be afraid. What you can't learn today, you will learn tomorrow. And the children are not stressed. Instead of in Japan, after our commission, when we gave our results to Macron, our president. The commission was translated, and the first decision in Japan was to forbid the second school, because in Japan they had 2 schools. a daily school compulsory and another school in the night in the houses, or sometimes in coffee, sometimes in and children were working until 23 in the night. And there were a lot of children suicide. And the first decision in Japan was to forbid the second school, to slow the scholar rhythm. And I am waiting for the result, but I think that as soon as the second school has been forbidden, the scholar results remained as good as before, and children's suicide will drop. I think so. I hope that they will drop. The second sensorial niche is structured by his family connectedness, and John Bowlby, who is the main trigger of resilience. John Bowlby said in 1951, in his report to the WHO, World Health Organization, John Bowlby told that the most protective family is composed of 6 to 8 attachment figures, which allows a child to weave different types of attachment, which is a strong protective factor. Kindergarten and a new educational politics, slowing learning, give the child a self-confidence better than a speed learning, more stressing. And when they are 15 years old, children are in the first place. In Finland, they were late at 10, and they are in the first or second place at 15, at a PISA evaluation. The third sensorial niche is structured by the planet of world, allowing children to live in a noetical world. We can say that it's close to spirituality. And spirituality is another world, is a world of impossible to perceive. You can perceive heat, you can perceive cold, heat, but you can't perceive spirituality. And the affiliation, for instance, artistic creation, for instance, that built a feeling of well-being. The best benzodiazepine, the best securizing, the best tranquilizer for young people is art, theater, growing, cinema. How do you say cinema? Films, literature, and artistic creation built a feeling of well-being or pride of self and a feeling of belonging. This noetic world depends mainly of numerous stories telling stories for the child to make him able to judge. The child, it's an internal freedom. Hannah Arendt, I don't know if you know who was Hannah Arendt. She told us that we can learn an internal liberty, the ability to choose. We are judged, even a child. We are judged. We can say that is good for me, that is not good for me, and to develop empathy. The empathy is acquired only after the 4th year. In the first years of life, a child is not able to empathy. He cannot represent what represents another child, the mind, the child, another mind. But when he arrives at 4 years, a child is able to represent the representation of another child. And so it's ethic world. We can live together and we are no longer perverse. Freud told us that a child is perverse, polymorphic perverse, until the first 3 years. But when empathy develops, the child represents the representation of another child, and he becomes ethic, moral. But when we realize the same observation in Marseille, abandoned children, when children were alone, they were not able to empathize until 4 or 6, and sometimes they were not able to empathy, and they become psychopaths. Because we need alternative, we need alterity, we need biological alterity, perceive his eyes, perceive his words, his sound, perceive his color, perceive his smell, and so on. But as soon as we become able to speak and to inhabit a story where who my family was from, in which country, which is my ancestors, where will I live after my death? It's impossible to perceive who were our ancestors. It's impossible to perceive where we are living after our death. We can only imagine. We can only think, and so we are able to construct another world and to make us able to discuss, to read, to travel, and to discover other world, and we become empathic.
Good afternoon, Dr. Cyrulnik. I am Marce Pero. I am the coordinator, the general coordinator, but it's only memorial, because in this project, everyone have a coordinator, have a work. We are a very good team. The first of all is to say thanks for all members to the Resuperes project. It's an honor, how Carolina Sousa, to say that you are with us. We are very happy that you are fine, very good, and everyone hope to know you soon. Yeah? Other opportunity for you know. My question is about that you know that the Resuperes project was created with the idea that we heard of you about the areas and the arts of visual aesthetics, physical activity, development of the resilience. Okay? Well, then I want to ask you, do you think that in the actual university context, we must to have a transversal subject that development or improve the constructs of resilience, like teamwork, creativity, leadership, heritage cultural, that is that important for the students in the professional and personal life? And in the professors, do we need that the formation? We need the formation about these constructions for the change that have in our context, no? What do you think? Because our one of the results of our project, the finally, is our idea is that one subject that we have to introduce in the curriculum for transversal, for every graduate, yes, or for the improve or development, the resilience for everyone, professors and teachers in the university context. What do you think? And thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. If I have well understood, I can say that it's impossible to work resilience when we stay alone. We are due to work in a multidisciplinarity group. Because trauma in adverse circumstances are grounded in biological, affective, social, and noetic levels. Each of us has got its own determinant of resilience. The biological resilience, now, it's easy to dose in neurobiology, it's easy to photography in neuroimaging, and neurological resilience is the most easy to trigger. I said that one night or two after the mother is securized, the baby starts again electroencephalographical development normal for its age. One or two nights after the mother is securized, the baby becomes healthy. But after, when we are in the political level, it's very important to collect different data. And adults can express themselves and hear different discourses, what is called maybe democracy. When there is only one language, making mute others' language, that is called totalitarianism, which constitutes an impoverished niche that prevents for resilience. But when we speak in a totalitarian language, we are not able to judge. We are only able to make a recitation. It's not a way of thinking. It's only making words as once our chief. It's not a way of thinking. Only democracy and conflict are able to make us in a social way of resilience. The social ecology of resilience in best understood in terms of trajectory and sense of meaning. And to give meaning to a fact, to give meaning to an event, we need literature, philosophy. We are far from biology. Both are necessary. Both are necessary, but it seems opposite. And so it's necessary to work in teams. We are due to make, when I work through resilience in my teams. They were biologists, they were psychoanalysts, they were sociologists, they were novelists, they were priests. I am currently directing a thesis for a young priest, who is also a psychologist, and he is making his thesis about Teilhard de Chardin. I don't know if you know if Teilhard de Chardin is well known in Portugal, but Teilhard de Chardin integrates what I said instantly, integrates biological data, brain, even animals, and of course psychology, and noetic world, the world of ideas cut far from biology. But there is currently a new problem in France. I don't know which is this problem in Portugal, but in France there is a growing number of incest. And it's amazing. It's unbearable that in France, the evaluation of incest is about 3% of the population. It's unbearable. It's amazing. And I propose to explain that this huge number, is due to the dilution of the family. Because currently in our new families, the feeling of being a father is not imprinted in our memory. We are a man, and to become a father, we are due to attach, to weave links with our baby. And when a young father currently in France are mainly weaving links with her baby, and so the man will feel himself as a father, and incest will be totally inhibited. It will be impossible to practice incest. But when we are not able to feel as a father, and it's possible. And the number it is the same in USA. In USA, there is a huge number of incest, and in France, it's evaluated about 3%. What I think is unbearable, and I believe that each time that a society is diluted, the incest is growing up. And the incest is a mark of dilution of a society. I don't know. It's possible. I don't know what you're thinking of that, but it's possible that there is young people currently will learn 3, 4, 5 jobs, different jobs, and will make 3, 4, 5 couples with a lot of children of different fathers. There is no longer family structure. I don't know what you think of what I said.
Dear Professor Boris, we go to finish because your conference was excellent, but I only want to tell you this little information. For the moment, in Portugal, there is doesn't exist this problem of a lot of incest. I think so. We think so. But we regret that that happens in some place of the world. And thank you. I finish to thank you again and tell you that it was a great honor to us to have you with us. And please go on with your work, marvelous work. We are here to listen you, to learn with you, and to love you, all of us. Thank you. Bye.
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 Se a gente fosse perguntar isso, a gente não saía daqui. Porque ele já está. Isto tem a ver com sociological problems.
Claro, claro. É a tua área.
Quanto mais desenvolvida é a sociedade.
Mais permissivos são.
Aquele sociólogo que fala da sociedade líquida.
É. Olha, meninos, gostaram ou não?